Hello, this is Magnus here, and today I wanted to talk about the difference between recording an MJPEG and off the Canon 6D in RAW using the Magic Lantern software. I wanted to compare the difference and which one's easier or works better when it comes to color correcting in post, and then of course your final product. My intention with what I recorded was basically to have a night looking scene, even though I have the settings and pretty much I'm in a well-lit environment right now. So how do you do that? Easy. Off the 5D Mark IV, just recorded in 4K mode, 30 frames per second. On the 6D, I had to download the Magic Lantern software and install. Now when it comes to Magic Lantern software and installing it, do it at your own risk, and if you choose, you can basically look it up online and see how to install it. But right now, that's not the point today. The point today is basically to see how it is raw. So first is first. Let me show you the settings on the Canon 6D when it comes to doing raw. You go into your Magic Lantern software and then basically choose the raw video. You'd have to turn it on and then pretty much turn on and off your camera. And then when you choose RAW, you have the ability to choose your resolution as well as other settings. I keep it basically at 960. Basically it's 540p, which is half of 1080p. Reason I do that is because I want to have it not drop frames when I'm recording. And unfortunately, off the 6D and using a SanDisk card, Extreme Pro, let me show that to you guys real quick. SanDisk Extreme Pro, actually not even a SanDisk Extreme Pro. This time I use LX series, but I did use the SanDisk Extreme Pro when I recorded the footage, which is already done at this point. I'm just pretty much putting this video together to show you guys the difference when it comes to editing and what advantages and disadvantages you get. Now, my anticipation was that the Canon 6D, because it's a lower resolution, you're not going to get as clear of a picture, obviously. But you'd have extreme advantages when it comes to color editing in software. So now let's go to the computer and see what we get. Take it off. So here, looking at the computer, basically I already recorded the footage and I transferred it over to my computer. There's the 5D Mark IV footage at 9 gigabytes. 9 gigabytes, and I recorded about 2.5 minutes worth. Now, when looking at the raw footage itself was about 4 gigabytes, but at 540p, so that's half the resolution. Now, when you download Magic Lantern Raw Viewer, you get kind of this software that's able to open the .mlv file that you work with, and right from the software, you're able to do some quick color adjustments, and of course, also adjustments to the exposure as necessary and as you'd want. Now, when you use this software, it gives you the ability to then output the format in .mlv or .dng. Now I output in .dng, and also you've got several log profiles that you're also able to adjust. But I just simply output the way I had it in .dng files, and it creates a .dng file for every single frame of the video that you captured. Now, what do you do with that? Simple. You take that and then you upload it into Premiere. You actually can just grab one file and then it will literally create a timeline of your .dng footage, which gives you the ability to make adjustments to exposure, tint, and temperature right from Adobe Premiere under effects controls for your video file. I think that's a great feature to have, and to make the adjustments right on the fly, it does pretty much no intense wear and tear on your actual hardware. Now, I decided to make this scene a little bit darker. I wanted to give it a kind of a night look, even though I recorded it in the same setting that I have right now in front of you guys, which is kind of a daylight kind of setting. So I basically looked at what I had and blue shifted it a little bit and decreased the exposure. I decreased the brightness. I wanted to really get that look that was really, what I was looking for. When it comes to, the scale, this video is 400 times what the original resolution was, which when you look at it, it only took a small portion of the screen. But I made it 400 times the size so that I can output it in 4K resolution to compare it to my actual 4K video that I made with the 5D Mark IV using the .MJPEG codec, which, as we've seen and as we looked at, it outputs a file size smaller than what a RAW size potentially could be. Now, the RAW file was smaller, but that's because the resolution itself was half the size of 1080p. Now, you take that 4GB file that I did in 2.5 minutes, and you multiply it times 4. That's 16 gigs. Potentially, it could be more. 16 gigs for only 2.5 minutes worth of footage. Now, when people complain about that .mjpeg, RAW files themselves are a lot more difficult, but they also give you a lot more flexibility. So moving on back to the computer, looking at the file that I imported right now, you can see everything's a lot brighter. I did a flat profile on the Canon 5D Mark IV, but look, it gives you no ability to make adjustments right from the effects controls without adding effects yourselves to make adjustments. Now, I decided to, pretty much go through my regular workflow on this flat profile by going into the workspace, the color workspace, to make my few little tweaks and adjustments. But since all that data is not captured in my file, I have to do it basically in a slow adjustment type of way that takes a little bit of time to actually make adjustments on my computer, and really just almost like a color overlay on my footage, as opposed to having all that color information in the file itself. Now, the 5D Mark IV outputs 8-bit 422 color internally when you record in 4K. So that gives me a little bit more flexibility to avoid banding and really bring in more color information. But unfortunately, it's not going to be at the same level as a RAW file from the Canon 6D. However, you get that great clarity of the resolution, and you get that flexibility of that slightly increased color depth when compared to the Canon 6D. Looking at the file, making a couple of more adjustments to temperature and exposure, but I don't know if you can tell off of the footage, my face was still kind of still had some type of reddish tint, even though I shifted the temperature mostly towards, a cooler temperature, and try to remove any type of reddish description I would have. It still kind of showed some sort of hue that I could see that I just couldn't get around, and you can see it right there when you look at the file. Now, granted, I tended to prefer the color and the output of the Canon 6D RAW file versus the 4K, but we'll see here in the outputs what you prefer when it comes to the actual output. Now, the colors, yes, I liked on the 6D, but the immense clarity that you get off the increased resolution is pretty much unbeatable. Now here I am making the last few minute adjustments, making it a little bit more saturated. Still, the scene looks kind of dark from what I've got, and I'm going to decide to pretty much export the coverage. So there you have it when it comes to the experimentation. Now, my personal opinion, again, like I said, 6D better color, but the resolution pretty much was there. Now look at the before and after of what you get when you compare what I did before I did the color effects and after, when I pretty much finished and got my output of what I wanted to be. But when I got that, I'm like, all right, now what do I do? Output it, see what I got, and compare the difference. Right now, I'm going to output this footage, show each one side by side, and you tell me what you prefer in the comments down below. So this is my intent to record RAW. I've got the Canon 6D recording RAW at half the resolution of 1080p. It's practically a 2x crop factor. Now here I am in 4K mode on the 5D Mark IV. Now this records in 8-bit 422 color, and you've got a lot of quality because of the 4K resolution that I'm recording at as we speak. One thing I did want to actually add to this is that when it comes to outputting the files, it took a lot longer to output the 5D Mark IV files than it did after my color adjustments with the 6D. Now I assume that's because of file size, but perhaps it could also be because RAW files are easier to work with off of Adobe Premiere Pro. But that, I leave it up to what the software and what it actually can do. Now, you guys can tell me what your opinion is. My opinion is still I would choose the higher resolution over the increased color depth, because if you set your settings correctly upright, and usually when I set my settings, I have the ability to do that beforehand to get the exact look that I want, or at least come close to it to do minor post-production editing later. I would prefer that increased detail and that increased resolution. However, not everybody works the same way, and having the ability to record RAW to pretty much not think, just shoot and worry about it later is a huge plus that I hope that the 5D Mark IV will eventually have. Let me know your comments down below of what you thought of everything. You guys make my day every day when you subscribe today. This is Magnus and I'm out. Hit that like, share, watch my videos. Hope you like them.